What's up, Degenerate Nation? Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast presented by BetMGM. This is your Monday college basketball preview. I am not Stucky. Yes, even Stucky takes a vacation. Don't worry, he'll be back in the host chair for Friday's episode. I am BJ Cunningham. I'll be joined by my friends Mike Calabrese and a special guest, Anthony DeBundo. We're going to go through the weekend that was in college basketball, give a few rants, preview Big Monday, Kansas versus TCU, and then give our best bet for Monday's slate and get out of here. But first, let me kick it to you first, Mike. How you doing?
Doing good. It survived the weekends. It was up and down in terms of my picks, but I think my main takeaway is the nonsense of the top 16 reveal, trying to stir up drama. Mick Cronin bitching and moaning that they're 8th instead of 6th. It's like, snore. Wake me up when you're debating something interesting, which I was on VSiN over the weekend talking to Jonathan Van Tobel, and he brought up an interesting idea. It's like, why are we releasing the top 16 teams? Why don't they release who's currently on the bubble and the at-large resumes that they're considering? Because I think those debates are far more interesting. If you line up North Carolina, who I believe is 0-8 in quad 1 games, against somebody like New Mexico, that's a compelling argument, and you can actually make an argument on both sides. Whereas the top 16 teams, the AP poll, it's been a slaughter at the top, teams dropping left and right to unranked opponents. And then really at this point, the only team that hasn't lost to an unranked opponent at the top of the charts is Kansas. And then they come in here on Monday night as an underdog to TCU. So there's nothing that you can trust at this point. Eventually, you got to put pen to paper during March Madness and put your weight behind one of these top seeds. I don't even know where I'm going in that direction at this point. Maybe I'll just go contrarian and Purdue, because everybody seems to be crapping on them and their freshman guards, and they're going to wilt, when the bright lights are shown on them in March Madness. But in general, it's way more fun to look at the bottom and the back half and the at-larges as opposed to these top seeds where you could reorganize the deck chairs on the Titanic all you want, because a handful of them are clearly going to lose in the first weekend of March Madness.
Yeah, it's funny. You mentioned the contrarian thing. I thought about that the other day. I was like, what if I just do a Final Four of like Purdue, Tennessee, Virginia, and Iowa State, just as a complete contrarian and defense wins out? But no, yeah, I agree with you. It's we just say it every single week. Like, there's no good team in college basketball. My big takeaway from the weekend is like, holy crap, what a second half from Kansas. Maybe we were a little bit wrong about them. I don't know. We'll obviously find out tonight against TCU. And then shout out to Jim Root, Second Chance Points, 3-man weave, for tweeting this out. And it's very true. Alabama obviously put up 100 points over Georgia. And he said, in a year where we obviously don't have one elite team, Alabama's best, when they're at their best, is clearly better than everybody else in the country. So that was my big takeaway. I think Alabama's still, they're number 1 overall seed per bracket matrix here. So that's not really going to be a surprise. So that was my one big takeaway. All right, I'll kick it to you, Anthony, my good friend, co-host of the Wonder Goal podcast. Why don't you first tell the listeners who you are, where you're from, who you root for, and your big takeaway from the weekend.
Yeah, it's my BBOC debut, so very exciting. Grew up on college hoops in mostly the Philadelphia area, the Big Five, and went to Syracuse, so, sort of root for them. I follow them. I wouldn't, it's hard to root for them these days. I'm kind of fair weather when it comes to the Orange, but I live about 15 minutes from Mike, actually, in Valley Forge, PA, so, the Philly burbs. But yeah, I just grew up on kind of Big Five hoops. So, St. Joe's and not Villanova and Temple were kind of the three pretty much that I would always root for. And then, who else I root for on a year-to-year basis really depends. Like last year, you find certain teams that you think are undervalued or that you think are, the market's wrong on, and then you end up betting the same team a lot for a season. It's like last year was like Colorado State and Wyoming. This year it's been a lot of Santa Clara and Washington State to varying degrees of success. So it depends on the year for me with who I love. Virginia Tech seems to be a team I end up on and will be on again this week. So it depends really on the time of the year and who I have money on.
As someone who bet a lot of Santa Clara basketball this year, can you settle it for us here on the podcast? How do you pronounce their star wing's name? Pajemski?
I think it's Pajemski, but I'm
we
not
probably
the best
should
with
figure it out.
pronunciations.
If they make
broadcasters say it
that
wrong,
name's coming up a lot. So
yeah, they say it differently depending on which night. Like you're watching the game, it's a little like Pajemski. But yeah, I mean, he's been awesome when he's been in the lineup. They've been quite good and competitive in that league. So They've had some good wins, took out Boise, rolled San Fran. Like they've had some pretty impressive showings this year. Just crushed BYU last week, but couldn't quite cover that second game against the Zags.
Yeah. Well, you think they're going to have a chance at maybe taking out a St. Mary's or a Gonzaga in the WCC tournament?
Yeah, they were competitive with Mary's in one of the meetings. The other meeting, not so much. So we'll see. But I think that they match up decently well with Gonzaga because Gonzaga doesn't really take away any of the post looks they want to get. They can get to the rim at will, so they can kind of just keep up with them. I think they're live to cover against Gonzaga. I don't know that they'll actually win because they're not getting many stops either. So it would be a fun matchup. But my biggest takeaway is actually also out west, and it's Arizona. I watched their entire game against Colorado. I don't get to watch as much Pac-12 because I find myself watching the Mountain West and the West Coast a lot. I was not particularly impressed with Arizona. Like the non-De Silva minutes against Colorado, like they destroyed them. But I didn't think they were particularly impressive when he was on the floor. Their perimeter defense is really bad. Like they leave a lot of shooters. That's a major red flag for me come March. And their transition defense is also quite bad. So you can get at this Arizona team. And they haven't really, the backcourt, like obviously Ballo and Tubelis are very good, but I have questions about the backcourt.
It's as simple as when Tubelis is in foul trouble, as he was, he sat, I think, at the 10-minute mark of the first half with 2 fouls. They kind of just become a slightly above average team. Like I know that he's top 10 in almost every player efficiency metric, and Ballo is also top 25, but he is the straw that stirs the drink. When he's not on the floor, it just looks like growing pains, like trying to figure out who's going to take that alpha role offensively for them.
And I do wonder if like having both of them on the floor at the same time, like, yes, they're great offensively and you really can't get anything at the rim, but that makes them very vulnerable on the perimeter. Like Kreese is not guarding. Ramey's a good individual defender. Larson's okay, but like they just leave a lot of shooters. And Colorado doesn't shoot well. They missed every open shot and still covered. But like a better shooting team is going to cause a lot of problems, I think, for the Wildcats in March.
Well, you'll get that date on March 4th when they travel to play UCLA. We'll see if they actually can hold them to anything like they, like the last time when UCLA took them out. All right, let's go to a couple rants. I'll start it off. I hate Princeton for what they did to me. I tried to bet them on try to catch Yale on a back-to-back because obviously, the Ivy Leagues are the back-to-back Friday night and then into Saturday. Let me pull this up really quick. So Princeton, they're up 19 with 8 to play. They completely melted down. And not even that, though. It was in the final few minutes. Basically, Yale just made a ton of free throws down the stretch. I mean, Princeton even had a 3-point lead with 14 seconds left. They foul, they do the patented, foul up 3. So, Yale goes down. They make 2 free throws. And then, of course, this is what happens. This is the patented why fouling up 3 sometimes doesn't work. Is they only make 1 of 2, and Yale comes down. They make a layup, tie it up at 70. They go to overtime, and what already happens there. Yale won by 10. So really didn't need that complete meltdown from Princeton there in the second half, but whatever. It happens. It's college basketball. Just a really horrible. But also I did get the DePaul backdoor was very nice. So I did get that one. So I'll kick it to you, Mike. Do you have a rant for this week?
Just in general, I know that name brands sell ad space and people want to talk about the Yankees and the Lakers and, the Cowboys. Enough with North Carolina. Like I said, they're 0-8 against quad 1 teams. It's clear that Baycott's hurt. He's just like laboring through. He's not as bouncy. He's not as dynamic on the glass. They can't shoot threes. They, play a good 12 minutes against NC State and then get run off the floor, even to the point where Keats was like, it's not a rivalry. Like he was kind of trolling them a little bit. But in general, it's like, I'm always an advocate for let's get more quality mid-major teams on the bubble into the tournament. I don't want to see this North Carolina team. And even the narrative that's getting thrown around as though they can turn it on. They're not like a Western Conference basketball team that's just going to start playing well in a best of 7 series. Like that's not the case. They're not the Warriors. They're not going to get healthy at the right time. There's enough of, their resume that's been shown through the games this year that we know who they are. And to be totally honest, I've had it with this team. I've had it with the ACC in general. Syracuse is another team there who's on the bubble, who is winless against quad 1 teams. It's like, I think it should go both ways. You get the benefit of the opportunity to get quality wins. And if you don't, that should really penalize you. That should hurt you. Because at the end, they're going to be like, oh, New Mexico or some of these teams, like a Charleston, if they go to their conference championship game and don't win, like, are they going to get in kind of thing? Like, absolutely. I want teams that have proven that they have higher ceilings than these ACC also ran. So just in general, I'm preheating the oven for my resentment of letting in teams like North Carolina, because I think at the end of the day, they might just sneak in and that'll piss me off.
Yeah, per bracket matrix, they are currently the last team out, and then teams behind them are New Mexico, Clemson, Utah State, Oregon, North Texas, and Texas Tech.
Yeah, I want North Texas. Give me North Texas over North Carolina for sure.
Exactly. Yeah, so it'll be interesting. Yeah, preseason number 1 has fallen this far. Crazy. Anthony, do you have a rant for this weekend?
I mean, I had one of my best Saturdays of the year, and I think it's important to remember like the good variance that happens. Colorado closed, I think 6 or 7-0 in the last 2 minutes. Pella Larson's like a 90% shooter. He missed the front end of a 1-and-1. And then Colorado didn't foul down 10, which was cool. They covered for me late. You mentioned DePaul backdoored that push on a miracle. They hit 2 threes in the last 40 seconds when they were down 20. So that was cool. I mean, it's always nice to get those. I'm wondering where Ed Cooley finds these guys, because that Providence Nova game, Nova played like pretty poorly. Like they shouldn't have really been in it. Like it was the wrong side. But Nova was down 4 with like 2 minutes to go. And they felt like they were very live to not even just cover, but potentially steal that game in Providence. And then Noah Locke and Devin Carter are hitting pull-up threes from like Hartford, contested, just like no doubters. And I'm like, these two guys who didn't even really play for Providence last year. And credit to Cooley. I mean, he's really mastered the transfer portal. They're always prepared in close games. They always win every close game. Tuesday, I have a Creighton Big East future, and they win in double overtime. I tweeted like, I think Providence has played every game in double overtime for the last year and a half, and they're like only lost, I think, one of them. So it's just crazy that Providence continues to run this good. It's funny. One of my good friends is a Providence fan, and I told him like, they're better than they were last year. They're not going to be a better seed. They probably won't make the Sweet 16 again, but like they're a better team this year. But this late game, like just magic is something else, and continues to burn me repeatedly. And so that would be my only real complaint from what was otherwise a great Saturday. Syracuse no showing aside, I didn't have money on the game, so I was watching as a fan, and just embarrassing to see the orange fold.
Yeah, again. It's funny because Providence is going to be on a 7 line. It looks like for the NCAA.
That's a better team than last year.
That's absolutely ridiculous. They are not a 7 seed, and that's just another thing stacking up against a 2 seed. Like if Texas has to play them in the round of 32, I actually feel bad for Texas in that situation. That's not their fault.
Oh boy, and
I would say Providence is right around like a 6 for me, probably.
Right.
But
yeah, no, they'll
non-conference
in line with my Iowa Hawkeyes, Maryland, and Michigan State. So all Big Ten teams on the 7 line. All right, let's kick it to Big Monday. There's actually a really nice game here in the Big 12. Kansas travels to Fort Worth to take on TCU. Kansas is currently at BetMGM TCU is currently at BetMGM a -1.5 favorite, with the total sitting at 151.5. I'll kick it to you first, Mike. What are your thoughts on this matchup?
I know that they got to go to Cowtown. I know that TCU potentially in their transition game can hurt Kansas, but I can't at this point in the season. We wrote off Kansas here on the podcast, and since then they've just been on the warpath. They have played really well against ranked opponents all season long, in my opinion, at least. And I know exactly what I'm getting in terms of their game plan with Jalen Wilson attacking the hoop and Grady Dick getting those threes up. So I don't know. I think the line's probably fair, but if I'm going to play it, my lean is on KU in this game. And it just seems like we've seen this movie time and time again, where even in the years where they're not the best team in the Big 12, they're able to circle the wagons and play their best down the stretch and grab at least a share of the regular season title. I think it's another one of those scenarios playing out. So I'm on KU here.
Yeah, I'm probably getting with you here, but I'll let you get your thoughts in here first, Anthony.
Oh, I just got an alert. The Action Network. We're recording this Monday morning.
I did this on
DJ Cunningham added bet Kansas +2.
Did this on purpose.
So I guess we're going head to head here.
Yep.
Give me the Frogs, baby. And I know I'm filling in for Stuckey, who has hyped up TCU at every possible turn and I think every single episode. But really, I mean, look, the numbers speak for themselves. TCU didn't have Mike Miles. He was out. They were 1-5. They were really terrible. He comes back. Now, are they going to shoot, over 50% from three like they did Saturday? No, but I think this is a decent matchup for them because Kansas's defense in transition is still pretty vulnerable. He doesn't grade out at an elite level, and that's where TCU really exposed them in the first meeting. Now, this is a good live betting game, I think, because of the way just how TCU plays. You're going to get runs back and forth. Like when Kansas is hitting their shots and TCU has to play in the half court, it's not necessarily a great half court offense. But when they're able to run off Kansas misses like the first meeting, they're going to be able to find some success. I don't think there's a huge difference between these two teams when they're both fully healthy. TCU is a little bit deflated in the advanced and underlying metrics, I think, because of Miles and Lampkin being out for like they were. But with them in the lineup, I actually think it's a decent matchup. And I'm comfortable laying the 1.5 with the Frogs. I will say I'm a little more skeptical on them as like a true, like, everybody has picked them. Jim Root, Stuckey on this show. Every episode we talk like TCU this, TCU that. I'd have to go back through. I don't know that there's ever a team in the modern college basketball era that's won the national title shooting 30% or worse from three. Like it's just such a 3-point, reliant sport. And that's just creates such a math problem for them. We will see in March. I just think there's going to be a game where they shoot 18% from three and like they just kind of go out. But the Frogs are fun. I love when, one of my favorite things about college basketball is just like the contrast of styles and matchups and stuff that you just don't really see in like the NBA. Well, in this situation, TCU is like such a fun team to profile. Like they're going to be underseeded for sure. Like they're not actually a 6-5 seed. I think they're in the top 10 to 15, but I just don't know you can win a national title shooting that poorly. I love to see them try. So it'll be fun, but I like the Frogs at home tonight, even though like the Bill Self road dog numbers are what they are.
Yeah, I love Kansas in this spot, and I understand that they've won 4 straight. But what I love about what Kansas has done, and kind of the reason why we wrote them off here is because they were such a streaky 3-point shooting team. They were so reliant on Grady Dick from outside the arc. But over this 4-game win streak, 166 of their 340 points have come at the rim. That's 49% of their points. They're not relying on 3-point shooting anymore. I mean, they put up 88 points against Texas. They made just 2 3-pointers. Even against Baylor this past weekend, they shot just 6 of 21 from beyond the arc, but still put up 1.3 points per possession. And the last time they faced TCU, only 22 of their 60 points came at the rim. And if you look at the shot quality numbers, they should have had more at the rim. So clearly Bill Self has said, stop shooting so many 3-point shots, get the ball inside of Jalen Wilson, and start scoring at the rim more. TCU was 133rd nationally in points per possession allowed at the rim. And if you look through TCU's metrics, it's basically just finishing at the rim in transition. Everything else is average to below average. And even the last game against Kansas, all of their metrics were just very below average other than that. And then they shot, like you mentioned, Anthony, they shot over 50% from outside the arc. Kansas is a top 50 team at defending the rim. Yes, they are bad in transition, and that is a worry here. But the flip side is Kansas offensively is a top 10 frequency team in terms of utilizing the pick and roll. TCU is 206th in points per possession allowed off the pick and roll. So even though Kansas has won a ton straight, this is a huge revenge spot for them as well. And they, obviously this game is huge for their potentially winning the Big 12 regular season. So I love Kansas +2. I think it's a great spot for them and a good revenge to beat TCU. And again, if TCU doesn't shoot 50% from 3-point range, what happens? So I think you're just getting an overinflated TCU team with Mike Miles back. So give me the Jayhawks at +2. I guess we're going head to head, Anthony. That's okay.
Mike Miles is worth 10 points of the spread.
I know, right?
According to my analytics.
Yeah, I know. If you ask Stuckey, it's 15. All right. Let's close it out here with some best bets. I'll kick it to you first, Night. What's your best bet from the Monday slate?
So for my best bet here, I'm going to go Big West play. One of the teams I really like, and I think it's Kismet that you two guys are soccer experts. I'm going to go with an international superstar, AJ Mitchell, coming in from Belgium. His favorite Premier League team is Liverpool. I don't know what that means. You guys can inform me.
They suck.
Okay. So in general, he turned down, not riches, but he could have made a pretty penny right away as, a 17, 18-year-old playing, in Europe, decides to come and play for the Gauchos. And overall, when he plays well, this is one of the best teams in the Big West. They're certainly going to vie for the regular season title with 5 games left. And I think this is a nice buy low spot. They've lost 2 in a row. Fullerton coming in, having won 4 in a row. But what I love is the contrast in styles. What they do is they slow down, they play a half-court game, they're the slowest team in the Big West, and then they go ahead and they nail their shots. They're 11th in shooting percentage. So I think this is an opportunity to take a team that clearly still has everything in front of them. They're only a game back in the Big West Conference title race. So I think you're going to get their best performance at home. They're a very strong home team, where Fullerton's kind of, middle of the road in that regard. Overall, I just think that the Big West tournament is going to be really interesting. It's going to be a fun one to handicap. There's some, as I mentioned, contrasts of styles in the way that these teams play. But the fact that you get Mitchell, who's a star on the wing, and Norris, who arguably is the best big in the Big West at this point, I really like what they bring to the table. It's a team that I've only bet a few times this year, but I think the fact that they're only laying 5.5, a team that I want to say they beat Fullerton by 12 at their place last time they played, I think there's plenty of value there. And I think the market's overcorrected based on, the recency bias here.
That was my best bet as well.
Whoa, look at that.
I guess we're going to be joining you. I'll add on a couple things here. So you mentioned the slow pace, obviously. They play primarily in the half court. Fullerton's 207th in points per possession allowed in the half court, and Santa Barbara is actually a top 50 team in terms of points per possession allowed in half court offense. And Fullerton as well plays a very, very slow pace. And they're just a really streaky 3-point shooting team. Like, they're shooting 38% from behind the arc in conference play, but if you look at their shot quality numbers, it should be 35% or around there. So they're bound to cool off a little bit here. And Santa Barbara, top 5 frequency team in terms of utilizing pick and roll. Cal State Fullerton's 239th in points per possession allowed on pick and rolls, and also Santa Barbara's top 40 team in finishing at the rim. Cal State Fullerton 190th in points per possession allowed at the rim. So I agree with you. Really good buy low spot here for Santa Barbara coming off 2 straight losses. So I'm with you. Santa Barbara minus 5.5. Anthony, are you going to make it 3 for 3, or do you have another best bet?
I'm going to stick in the Big 12. West Virginia, Oklahoma State under 145.5. This is surprisingly high for me. The first meeting, I bet the under at 140. It sailed under at 127. West Virginia's perimeter defense has been really bad in the conference. They have the worst 3-point shooting defense allowed percentage-wise. I tend to think that will ultimately regress back toward means, and that this perimeter defense isn't great. It's not as good as the rest of the Big 10 or Big 12, but it's not as bad as that number suggests. And Oklahoma State is certainly not the team that's going to really take advantage of that with their very poor perimeter shooting. They shoot 32% from 3, 32.5%. So I think it's going to be harder for Oklahoma State to really exploit this perimeter weakness. And West Virginia is going up against a defense that doesn't let you get anything at the rim. And I think that's going to be, another reason why they're going to have to shoot from the outside to get going. They can shoot pretty effectively, but they haven't been great in conference play. They're shooting around 33% too. So I think with a defense in West Virginia that's not going to get exploited at the perimeter, and potentially Oklahoma State, taking away the rim for West Virginia, which is where they like to get most of their offense. This is an under for me at 145.5. It actually got ticked up a couple points this morning. So I'm happy to play against that steam. Take the under 145.5. West Virginia, Oklahoma State.
All right, that'll do it for this Monday episode of Big Bets on Campus. Thank you to Anthony and Michael. Thank you to all our video and audio teams on the back end. Thank you to BetMGM, our sponsor. Stuck will be back in the host chair on Friday. Don't you worry, everybody out there. I'm not taking over. So make sure you check out the guys from the 3-Man Weave for the Thursday episode. As always, subscribe, unsubscribe, subscribe. You know the drill. Leave a 5-star review. Tell me how horrible of a job I did hosting. Tell me how badly you want Stuck back. As long as you leave a 5-star review, I don't care. We'll see you guys again on Friday morning. Again, make sure to check out the guys from 3-Man Weave, and we'll see you. Good luck on all your wagers. Cheers.
Go Frogs.